Chapter 2171. Waylon looked toward her and smiled. Meanwhile, at Southwest Villas. What? Cameron is a woman? Fabio was shocked to hear that too. Cameron was Sonny's only son, and everyone on the island knew that. However, this son turned out to be a daughter. The bodyguard who reported that looked at him. Everyone in the Southern clan has accepted it. Andre tried to use this secret as leverage, but Mr. Southern Sr. couldn't be bothered. Fabio looked dark. Andre really turned into Donald's dog. Donald doesn't know Sonny well enough. It's funny that he thought Sonny would compromise because of what he did. He had been careless about Donald. If he had known better, he wouldn't have let the wanted man stay on the island. Not only did Donald take advantage of him, but he also tried to take his place too. That was why the killers that Manuel had hired from the Skull Club would go to the Southern clan's territory to kill Cameron. It was because Donald had worked out something with them. It was naive of him to think that he would be able to win if he had enough connections. Meanwhile, after Donald discovered that his spy in the Southern clan had disappeared, he went into a rage. Bunch of useless pieces of shit. You can't even keep your eyes on one man. No one spoke except Chunky. They probably captured the person that we lost contact with. He must have ratted everyone out. Donald almost crushed a teacup in his hand. At that moment, a man rushed in and whispered something into Donald's ear, which made him raise his brows. Are you sure? The man nodded. I heard that she has ties with people from Metropolis. I didn't come to see you for 2 days, to avoid suspicion. Donald's anger faded, and he smiled. Manuel wasn't mistaken. Gail is from Metropolis. Chunky was shocked. She's using a fake identity? Donald smirked. No matter how she hid her past, the Gail here isn't the same person who worked with Huntley. Fabio probably would never think that he wrongfully blamed Buchanan, who had been loyal to him. I wonder what he'll look like when he realizes he killed the man who didn't lie to him. Daisy got up, walked to Cameron while smiling, and grabbed her arm. Cameron! Cameron saw that she looked healthy and radiant, so she raised her brows. You seem to be living a good life at your husband's place. Daisy blushed and let go of her arm. Nonsense. After they took a seat, the servers started serving the food. Nolace deboned the fish for Daisy and asked, Does the Southern clan have any plans? Cameron picked up the tea but didn't drink, then calmly said, The spy that Donald planted in the clan was removed. Gail had taken over Parkin, and now we wait for Donald to make a move against Fabio. Gail will be the key to Fabio's survival. Nolace placed the fish on Daisy's plate. That's what I think too. Your bet is on Fabio's failure. Cameron smiled. If Fabio wins, who will work with us? The enemy of my enemy will at least be half a friend. She paused for a few seconds and looked up. And on top of that, we're in the light. Even if Donald wins the battle, you will still be there. Nolace had been hiding his identity and was the man behind the scenes, while the Southern clan would be in the light in the battle between Donald and Fabio. Chapter 2172. Without Nolace, the Southern clan might not be able to win this battle against Donald, because even if they could sway Fabio, they wouldn't be able to do that to Donald. Nolace understood him better than anyone else. Even if Fabio lost everything and Donald got the upper hand, Nolace would be able to attack while Donald was unprepared. A few days later, the Parkin warehouse was engulfed in flames. The previously glamorous Chamber of Commerce was only a pile of ash when the firefighters put out the fire. It was lucky that no one was hurt. When Fabio caught wind of it, he flew into a rage. Why would fire randomly start there? Where's Gail? Tell her to come to see me. The others hung their heads low and didn't speak. One of the men carefully answered, Miss Leroy is missing. Fabio grabbed him by the collar. What do you mean? The man shook and said, Miss Leroy suddenly disappeared, and none of us can get a hold of her. Bad news. A bodyguard rushed into the study, out of breath. The working capital of the Chamber of Commerce has been frozen. All the files and agreements signed with other businesses have all been deleted too. Fabio was utterly stunned. The business agreements were signed with outrageous terms because he wanted high returns. He took 90% of the shared profit, but the businesses would only get 10%. The agreements would last for 10 years, and the other parties wouldn't be able to breach their agreements without probable cause. Once the businesses found out what happened, they would be able to void the contracts. Even if they changed anything on it, Parkin wouldn't be able to prove otherwise. That fire burned all the agreements, and even the funds had been frozen. It was a huge loss. Since Parkin was where all the cash flow of the Southwest District went, doing anything to Parkin would mean an attack on him. Fabio stumbled backward. How? How could this happen? Are you trying to figure out who betrayed you? Donald walked into the study with his men, but was blocked by a few men. Donald wasn't afraid of them and still had a smile on his face. Fabio's face turned dark. It was you? You're wrongly accusing me. His smile widened. Not only that, but you even wrongly accused Mr. Gibson. Fabio's chest started hurting, and he didn't speak. Donald still looked calm. I can understand that you're not really good at reading people. I'm sure you don't know that Gail Leroy is working for Metropolis either, right? Fabio was astonished. What? Gail, the girl who was working for you, wasn't the Gail that Huntley sent to help you. She was replaced. Donald glared at the men and then at Fabio's face. Buchanan was loyal to you, but you killed him because Gail suspected him. That was such a terrible loss. Fabio was on the brink of breaking down. The truth hit him like a hurricane and drowned him, making him feel frustrated like he had never felt before. He had never considered he would fail, because he had half the island's power. Everyone bowed down to him, and he was the one in control of everyone's fate. He was arrogant and thought that he was better than anyone just to end up being played by this man. Donald enjoyed watching his expressions change. I'm guessing you won't be able to overcome this huge loss. What will you use to trade now that you don't have a source of income? I'm sure no one will want to work with you after you go bankrupt in a day. Mr. Puzo, it's time your era comes to an end. Chapter 2173. Sonny and Waylon were playing a game of chess in the study when there was a knock on the door. Mahina walked in and stood next to them. Sir, Parkin has been burned to the ground. Sonny's pawn dropped onto the board, and he smiled. Miss Quinn works quickly. In. Waylon smiled. Destroying Parkin would cut Puzo off from his money. He's going to drown in debt, and on top of that, Donald is going to attack him. He's not going to last long. The butler stood at the doorway. Sir. Sonny turned over and saw someone standing behind the butler. It was Mateo. Mateo walked into the room and nodded. Sir. Aren't you? Sonny was surprised and stood up. You're still alive? Mateo smiled sadly and slowly said, I thought I was going to die too. When Fabio sent Gail to kill me, I sliced open that person's throat with a dagger. Everyone was hurt, and I was badly injured too. I don't know why, but Gail ended up helping me. She found somewhere for me to hide and told everyone that the man's body was mine. She told me to lay low for a while. I was worried that Fabio would try to kill me again if he found out that I was still alive, so I hid. Sonny nodded, walked to Mateo, and placed his hand on his shoulder. I'm glad that you're alive. Jokin will be very happy when he finds out. Mateo lowered his head. I feel bad for not helping. Sonny sighed. It's fine. Jokin needs you, and you being alive is the best thing that could happen now. After Mahina walked Mateo out, Sonny and Waylon walked downstairs together. Sadai has executed the plan, and there's only one step left. Waylon stopped on the stairs and turned to see him. When Fabio is alone with no help, he will turn to you. Sonny smirked. Yes, I'm waiting for him to come to see me. Sonny looked toward the courtyard and saw someone, then frowned. Minzy was there in a white off-shoulder dress with loose cabbage hem sleeves. She had a blue teardrop pendant necklace and earrings, which made her look very classy. She politely greeted Sunny. Mr. Southern. Senior. Sunny knew why she was there and wasn't very happy about it. Still, he was courteous. Are you here to see Cam? She paused and looked toward Waylon and smiled. I'm here to see Mr. Goldman. Sunny's smile faded as he nodded. All right, I'll leave you to it then. He walked into the courtyard with his hand behind his back and into a long corridor, then took a step back and peeked at them from behind a wall. Waylon stood at the front of the long corridor and looked back at Minzy while smiling. How can I help you? Minzy tucked her hair behind her ear and looked down. I bumped into you a few days ago at Yuzu Villa. Miss Southern told me about your relationship. I'm sorry, because I thought you had an unconventional relationship. Waylon squinted. What did she say? She said that you weren't together. Minzy looked up at him. Did you try to mislead me the other day? Waylon played with his cuff in deep thought. Minzy wrapped her fingers tighter around her bag and hesitantly asked, Are you seeing someone? Chapter 2174. Are you interested in me? Waylon's sudden bluntness made Minzy blush and look down with a smile. I felt a rush when I saw you. I guess that's what love at first sight feels like. Waylon nonchalantly looked around. What do you like about me? Minzy paused, then smiled. Do I need a reason to? You don't, but I don't think I'm charming enough to make you fall for me at first sight. Are you not confident? She looked shocked. He smiled. If Cameron hadn't messed up the date intentionally, and if she were a man, would you date her? Minzy couldn't answer that because if Cameron were a man and hadn't messed up the date, she wouldn't know if she would date her. And that was before she met Waylon. Minzy clearly said, if I didn't meet you, I might. Fate is such an interesting thing, right? Waylon squinted. You look like a good choice for a wife. She looked happy. Do you really think so? He calmly continued. But to me, we're from two different worlds. You're a well-read and intelligent woman, so you should find a suitable partner. I'm not that person. Minzy was stunned. After a long pause, she said, I can fit into your world and slowly get to know you. I think you don't understand. Waylon smiled and spoke in a calm tone. Look at it this way, if you and your bodyguards were in trouble, would you face the attackers together with them or leave them? Minzy was curious. Why would I be in danger when my bodyguards are there? He then asked, what if your bodyguards lost to the attackers? Minzy frowned. Isn't that what they're supposed to do? Even if they were all in trouble, the bodyguards were supposed to protect her from harm. Why are you asking this, Mr. Goldman? Waylon looked down. You're right that the bodyguards are paid to protect you, but you never have to face attacks and killing attempts on the island. As such, you don't have to be worried. However, in my world, it happens, and I might just lose my life. If you can't protect yourself and have to rely on the bodyguards, if the attackers are vicious, not only the bodyguards, but even your life will be at risk too. If something happened to me, what could you do? Minzy's face turned pale. She had never faced anything like in the movies before. Her uncle was a police officer, and her dad was a real estate mogul. They weren't the richest family, but they were upper class. She never had to face any of that under her uncle and dad's protection. What Waylon meant by from different worlds was clearly expressed. Minzy bit her lips, and her eyes turned red. So, you're rejecting me because of this? Waylon stood under the vines as he replied, not entirely. She turned to face him. Why then? He slowly said, I don't feel butterflies when I see you. But we can work on that. If there's nothing initially, it's very difficult to work on it. Waylon looked at her sternly. I don't like to force myself to do anything that's pointless, including when it comes to relationships. I hope you understand. Chapter 2175. Sunny, hiding behind the wall, smiled from ear to ear. Someone suddenly patted his back, so he jumped and turned around, only to see Cameron. Cameron crossed her arms. She was going to leave in her pajamas, so she wore a jacket to cover it and didn't even bother to comb her hair. "What are you doing snooping around?" She looked over, but Sunny pulled her back. "Be careful, don't let them see you." After saying that, he couldn't help but poke his head out. Cameron did the same and was surprised. "Isn't that Wayne and Minzy? Are they dating?" Sunny took a deep breath to suppress his anger. She's confessing her feelings to him. Cameron was shocked. "That's quick." Sunny smiled. "Do you feel like rushing over?" She didn't even think about it. "I'm not crazy. Why would I interrupt them?" "Are you not angry?" "Why should I be angry?" Sunny couldn't suppress his anger anymore. He took 2 steps back and kicked her while she wasn't paying attention. She flew forward and almost ran into a pillar. When she stood up, she turned to yell at him. "Why did you do that?" But alas, Sunny was long gone. Cameron angrily tidied up her clothes and suddenly froze, then looked toward Waylon and Minzy. They were both staring at her. Cameron forced an awkward smile and waved at them. "Carry on, don't let me stop you." She was going back in the house when Waylon rushed over and grabbed her by her arm. She turned back in shock. Waylon hugged her by her shoulders and pulled her to Minzy. "Didn't you ask if I think someone is a match for me?" "She's a match." Cameron was surprised and was going to shake him off, but he held on to her. Minzy was astonished, but she looked down after a short pause, turned, and left. Cameron moved Waylon's hand away and put some distance between them. "Are you addicted to using me to push people away?" Waylon smiled. "That wasn't the first time, so it wouldn't hurt if I did it again." "It would." Cameron poked his shoulder while looking furious. "I've had enough rumors that involve you. I'll kill you if you give me one more nightmare." Waylon raised his brow as he caught something. "Nightmare?" She paused, then avoided his eyes. "It's not exactly a nightmare, but it wasn't a sweet dream either." Waylon kept his eyes on her as he asked, "You dream about me?" Cameron's face dropped because her heart was a mess. Why would she talk about her dream? She felt shame and guilt when she looked at his face. Waylon squinted. "I was right. Yes, I dreamed about you." Cameron made up a dream. "In my dream, you stole my inheritance, land, and house. You even stole my pigs." Waylon chuckled. "What else?" Cameron licked her lips, trying hard to think. His smile widened. "You don't really think when you lie about your dreams?" She looked away. "Nobody remembers their dreams." Waylon approached to see her expression. "But you remember that I stole your inheritance, land, house, and your pigs." Chapter 2176. Cameron did not say anything and kept lowering her head. Waylon let out a meaningful smile and said, "Your inheritance isn't enough for me to buy diners. I don't have any intention of taking over your house or land. As for the pigs, I can think about that." Cameron squinted and asked, "You're interested in pigs?" He fixed his gaze on her and replied, "Kind of." Cameron felt something was not right, but she couldn't explain that feeling as she focused on Waylon's gaze. She kept staring at him until a cough rang out in the air. She hastily withdrew her gaze and turned around to look at Sunny, who was walking toward them. Sunny let out a sigh and shook his head. "I don't know about you people, but I've come across this kind of person where they're very smart at something, but when it comes to another thing, they're as dumb as a pig." Cameron stared at Sunny and said, "Why do I have a feeling that you're talking about me?" Waylon placed his finger in front of his lips. God knew how difficult it was for him to suppress his laugh. Sunny looked in another direction and waved his hand. "Forget about it, just let nature take its course. By the way, look at yourself. What are you wearing? Look at Minzy. Look at how she dresses, and look at yourself. Since you've decided to become a girl again, then stop behaving like a dude. It's embarrassing." Cameron lowered her head to look at her pajamas before raising her head and draping a jacket on herself. With her head held high, she said, "I can wear whatever I want. After that, she went back into her room. Sunny looked at Waylon. Even though he already knew the answer, he still whipped up a smile and asked, "Wayne, I heard that you've rejected Minzy. Is it true?" "I thought you were looking from the side the whole time," Waylon replied in a straightforward manner. Sunny laughed embarrassingly and replied, "It seems like you were aware of it." After that, he suddenly remembered something and asked again, "But is it true about what you said just now?" Waylon crossed his arms in front of his chest and replied, "It depends on how you think about it." The grin on Sunny's face widened as he continued. "Can I say that you have a thing for Cam?" Waylon did not say anything in return. Even though he did not answer his question, Sunny already knew his answer. He clasped his hands behind his back and said happily, "Today is a good day for a scrumptious meal. I'll go to prepare dinner now." Fabio sat alone in the study room with his hand covering his face. It seemed everything around him had come to a complete stop, and he looked forlorn under the shower of the evening sun. His bodyguard entered the room. He stood in front of the table and reported carefully, "Mr. Puzo, they've already learned about the things that happened to the Parkin Chamber of Commerce and—" The bodyguard lifted his eyelids and continued. "Most of our men and the people from the Parkin Chamber of Commerce have defected to Mr. Matthews." Fabio put his hand down and leaned against the back of his chair. There was no expression on his face, and he looked exceedingly calm. "What about you? You didn't choose him?" The bodyguard lowered his head. "I remain loyal to you, sir." "Loyal?" He chuckled as a sarcastic smile crossed his face. "It's never in my wildest dream that the thing that causes my downfall is this word. Unfortunately, I won't trust anyone anymore." He pulled a Browning out and pulled the trigger, before the bodyguard could even say anything. The bullet hit the bodyguard in his forehead, and blood dyed the wall red like a crimson flower. The bodyguard fell down onto the pool of blood on the floor. Fabio caressed the Browning in his hand. Another 2 bodyguards came into the study room when they heard the gunshot. "Mr. Puzo." When they saw the man lying in the pool of blood, their expression changed, and cold beads of sweat began to ooze out of their foreheads. Fabio raised his eyelids to look at them. "How many people do we have left?" One of the bodyguards replied, "About 100. He gnashed his teeth and set his jaw tightly as a gloomy expression crossed his face. "Donald, I must kill you with my own hand one day." Fabio and his men left the mansion. When the person in the dark saw Fabio entering his car, he pulled his phone out in an attempt to make a call. Chapter 2177. However, he was hit on the back of his head before he could make the call and fell unconscious. Standing behind him, Sadai picked up the phone from the floor, and it was only then she realized he wanted to call Donald. The sky was getting darker, but the East Islands were brightly lit like an illuminating pearl. Several cruises were moving slowly on the sea. They would arrive at the East Island's southern port in another 2 days. It was bright in the cabin, and Quincy lowered the curtain. He turned around to look at the people behind him. "Make sure you stay low profile when you arrive at the island later. Don't get yourself exposed." The group of people said, "Don't worry, we will. We'll tell the people we meet that we're here to do business. Besides, we'll leave some of our guys on the ship as backup. This way, people won't be suspicious of us." Quincy nodded. "Get some rest early." Meanwhile, at the southern residence, sleep wouldn't come to Cameron. She sat up frustratingly, took a jacket, and left the room. Sunny and all maids had already fallen asleep at this time. The street light dimly lit the courtyard, while the humming of the insects from the bushes was pleasing to the ears. Cameron draped the jacket on herself and walked up to the lizard. She leaned forward to observe it and chuckled. "It seems to me that you're only active at night." The lizard was sitting on top of the house made from broken branches. Despite the fact that it gave Cameron the cold shoulder because it was a cold-blooded animal, it was not afraid of her since it had lived with her for a long time. Cameron opened up the cage and put it on the back of her hand. It sat on her hand firmly, with its head held high. She sat on the chair and fed it with some food. "Should I find a partner for you?" You seem lonely. What kind of lizard do you like? I'll go look for one for you tomorrow. Even though the lizard couldn't understand a single word Cameron said, she still talked about a lot of things. Cameron did not know that Waylon was standing behind her. He was leaning against a pillar and listening to her as she brainwashed the lizard on her hand. After a long while, he chuckled. You're not afraid of a lizard, but you're scared of a mouse. You're pretty weird, Miss Southern. Cameron was startled by his voice and jerked her head to the back. What are you doing? Standing behind my back? He walked down the staircases and said, I didn't want to disturb you too. As Cameron continued to feed the lizard, she asked, why are you not sleeping in the middle of the night? You too. Why are you not in bed now? She turned her head around. That's because I can't sleep. Waylon smiled. Another nightmare? What did I take from you this time? She was stumped. Can you please stop teasing me with that? He sat down with his legs crossed. He was wearing a white shirt, which accentuated his skin's fairness under the light. The seriousness on his face seemed to have waned off a bit, and there was a touch of gentleness in his eyes. It's finally coming to an end. Cameron was stunned as she knew what he was talking about. She lowered her head and said, it has been almost half a year. Well, it's considered fast. After everything was over, they would leave the East Islands, and they wouldn't see each other anymore. She did not know why, but she felt a bit disappointed. Maybe it was because she didn't have any chance to see Daisy anymore. After all, it was pretty rare to come across a naive and silly girl like her. Waylon turned his head sideways and captured every emotion that crossed her face. After a while, he reached out to her. Cameron was confused. What? Did you bring your cell phone? He asked. Cameron pulled her cell phone out of her pocket. You didn't bring yours? He did not reply and took over her phone. Your fingerprint. Cameron pressed her finger on the screen and unlocked the phone. He made a call using her cell phone before proceeding to save his own number into her cell phone. Chapter 2178. Cameron took her phone back and looked at the screen. You can just say it if you want my number. There's no need to be so secretive. What if you rejected me? Wouldn't it make me look bad? Waylon replied nonchalantly. Cameron looked at him and replied, why should I reject you? It's just a phone number. Suddenly, something crossed her head before she could finish her sentence. She raised her eyebrows and chuckled. Are you not worried that I'll delete your number? There's nothing I can do if you want to delete my number, replied Waylon, but about the check. Cameron's expression changed, and she turned off her phone as if she was worried that she might accidentally delete his number. Don't worry. I won't delete it. He narrowed his eyes. It seems to me that I'm the one getting the short end of the stick in this deal. Cameron put her phone back into her pocket and replied matter-of-factly, we're all in the same boat. There's no need to make such a clear difference between you and me. We're in the same boat, huh, repeated Waylon. Yeah. We're working together on something, so doesn't that put us in the same boat? Cameron raised to her feet and put the lizard back into the cage. Besides, you've crushed the Parkin Chamber of Commerce and taken all the assets that Fabio gained in the past. I don't think it's outrageous for me to take $1,500,000 from you, right? Waylon placed his arm on the armrest and looked at her. So, you're the one who got the short end of the stick? She crossed her arms in front of her chest and turned her head around. Am I not? He let loose a laugh and said, all right then. Whatever you said. Cameron was stunned. What is going on with him? No, what is going on with me tonight? Why do I feel that he's looking at his girlfriend when he's smiling at me? She did not know why such a ridiculous thought would appear in her head. She felt that it must be because she was tired. When Waylon saw that she was staring at him again, he squinted. Why are you staring at me like that? Cameron suddenly went closer to him and asked, can you smile at me again? Stunned, he asked, what? I said, can you smile at me again, like how you smiled just now? Cameron stared at him fixedly, and she didn't realize the changes in his emotions. He turned his head around and averted his gaze. No. Cameron grabbed his cheeks with her hands and pressed on. Just smile at me once. I want to see how it is different from your usual smile. Waylon looked at her fixedly. If it hadn't been for the serious expression on her face, he would think that she was seducing him. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her hand away. It's getting late. We should go back to sleep. Just when he was about to stand up, Cameron stretched her arm forward to grab him. Hey, wait. Suddenly, she tripped herself and lost her balance. As she fell toward the front, she accidentally grabbed his shirt, causing 2 buttons on his shirt to come out and reveal half of his muscular chest. Waylon wanted to grab her, but everything was happening too fast. She fell into his arms, and her hand landed on his chest, the temperature of his skin so high that it scalded her palm. She was shocked and stared at his chest for a long while. She didn't know what had happened, but she was running her hand over his chest when she came to her senses. Setting his jaw tightly, Waylon looked at her. Can you stop now? Cameron raised her head to look at him and laughed embarrassingly. She retracted her hand and said, I didn't expect you to be so fit since you look so skinny. Waylon grabbed his shirt and replied indifferently, I didn't expect you to be someone who would take advantage of another person as well, Miss Southern. She was stunned and answered matter-of-factly, I didn't do it on purpose. It's your shirt quality problem, and now you're blaming it on my hands? Yeah, he replied. Even the best, quality shirt won't survive if you pull it like that, so yes, I'm blaming it on your hand. Cameron was rendered speechless as she felt Waylon had made a point. Chapter 2179. Cameron crossed her arms in front of her chest and turned her face sideways. I'll buy you another shirt. Waylon squinted and replied, I'm sure you know that all of my clothes are bespoke suits, right, Miss Southern? Cameron was stunned and looked at him in shock. Are you saying that I need to go to Staslow to look for the shop? Didn't you say you wanted to buy me a new one? Waylon lifted his eyebrows. Since you're going to buy me new clothes, you have to show some sincerity, don't you think so? She took a deep breath, gnashed her teeth, and replied, fine. I shouldn't have promised you anything. Cameron turned around and stormed back to her room. Waylon looked at her and asked, Are you not going to buy me a new shirt anymore? I don't have money, she replied without turning her head back. Even though Cameron acted shamelessly, Waylon did not get angry at her. After all, it was just a shirt, and he did not feel the need to make a big scene out of it. The next day, Cameron did not see Waylon or Sunny when she went downstairs to get her breakfast. She asked the butler, and he told her that Sunny had already gone out since morning. As for Waylon, he probably hadn't woken up yet. She squinted and did not say anything. Cameron felt bad since she was the one who had accidentally ruined his clothes. Since she was going to receive a check from him, she felt that she should be able to afford to order a bespoke suit for him. After she finished her breakfast, she came to Waylon's room with a tape ruler. She knocked on the door, but Waylon did not reply. She twisted the doorknob and went into the room. The curtain remained closed, and the room was dark. The man lying on the bed was still sleeping. He was lying in a supine position. His silky pajama was slightly open, and his chest rose and fell gently with every breath he took. Cameron tiptoed toward the bed. It was not that she had never seen a man sleeping before. When she went to sea and slept under the same roof with those men, their sleeping postures were simply ridiculous. All of them slept with their limbs spread. They would sleep at any place they wanted, and this was the first time she saw someone sleep like Waylon. He lay flat on his back, with a perfect sleeping posture. There was not a single crease on the duvet above him, and he looked as if he had never turned his body over. Cameron leaned forward and called out to him, Wayne? He did not reply. Cameron took out the tape ruler and placed it on his shoulder. 9.84 inches? Not bad. She looked downward. Now is his chest size and waist size. Cameron hesitated for a moment and moved the tape ruler down. She slipped the tape ruler behind him with her finger. She was worried that he might wake up suddenly, so she kept her movements light. Suddenly, Waylon frowned and turned around, startling her and causing her to hide under the bed. After a long while, she poked her head out and heaved out a sigh of relief. It took Cameron a lot of effort before she could get his chest size. 44.8 inches. She wrote it down on her palm and mumbled, "He really has a good body." There was only one measurement left, and that was his waist size. Slowly, ever slowly, she moved the tape ruler down. Just as she flipped the duvet open, he grabbed her wrist, and she fell on his body. Waylon opened his eyes and looked at the person on his body. "What are you doing, Miss Southern? Are you molesting me?" Cameron jerked up, taking the tape ruler with her. "I'm not molesting you. I'm just taking your measurements." He placed his hand on his forehead and chuckled deeply. "Didn't you say you didn't have any money last night? What made you change your mind and want to buy me a shirt today?" Waylon sat up slowly, closed his eyes, and massaged his nose. "Not only that, but you were getting handsy with me when I was asleep." She was stumped and said, "I was not. Your body isn't that good at all." He opened his eyes and chuckled. "Really? I remember hearing someone say I had a good body just now." Cameron jerked up. "So you were awake the whole time." Chapter 2180. Waylon did not defy her claim. "I've been awake from the moment you came in." Cameron was stumped. "So, you've been pretending to be asleep the whole time?" He chuckled. "If I didn't pretend to be asleep, how would I know what you were trying to do?" Cameron was so angry that the veins on the corner of her forehead bulged. She felt as if she had been toyed with by him. She took a deep breath, placed her hands on her waist, and said, "Initially, I wanted to buy you a new shirt, but since you toyed with me like that, I think I don't want to buy you any clothes anymore." He raised his eyebrows. "I didn't want you to buy me new clothes either. But since you want to," he got down from the bed and stood in front of her with his arms spread. "Take all the measurements you want." Cameron was stunned. She turned her head sideways and said, "I don't want to." Waylon pulled her hand, and before she could come around to her senses, he had already placed her arms around his waist. She was standing very close to him, and she was stunned. After a long while, his voice rang out above her, "Are you done?" She snapped back to reality, and quickly lowered her head to take the tape ruler out. She braced herself and took the measurement of his waist. After that, she jumped away from him and said, "All right, it's done." Cameron left his bedroom without turning his head back and rushed all the way back to her room after closing the door. She leaned against the door and placed her hand on her chest. Her heart was pumping so fast that it nearly jumped out of her throat. She was just measuring his waist. It was something very normal, but why was her heart pumping so fast? Meanwhile, Sonny was meeting with Fabio. He already knew Fabio's intention of coming here, so he was not surprised. He took up the cup and asked, "So what do you offer, Mr. Puzo?" He said, "If you can help me, I promise I won't do anything to the Southern clan anymore. If you don't trust me, we can sign an agreement." Sonny took a sip of tea and chuckled. "But why do I have to involve myself in the fight between you and Donald?" Fabio's face sank. "It won't do the Southern clan any good if Donald takes control over the East Islands. I'm sure you are aware of that, right, Mr. Southern Sr.?" Sonny looked at the tea in his cup and fell into thought. After a short while, he said, "You're right, Mr. Puzo. It won't benefit the Southern clan if Donald takes control over the East Islands." Fabio chuckled. "You care for nothing but the benefits of the Southern clan. Cooperating with us is the right choice." Sonny nodded. "I'll consider it." Fabio rose to his feet and left with his men. Sonny picked up his teacup and looked outside through the window. He seemed calm and relaxed. Mahina came into the private room and looked at him. "Fabio won't trust us so easily, but he chose to risk himself. Now that things have come to this point, he has no other choice. If he doesn't want Donald to take away everything he has, he needs to work with us." Besides, he's very clear that I won't let Donald take control over the East Islands either for the sake of the Southern clan. Sunny put the cup down and continued. Donald hasn't completely taken control over Fabio's men yet, so he has been keeping an eye on Fabio. If he learns that Fabio came to us, he'll also make his move. Mahina asked, so are we going to release the news? Of course, we are. Sunny rose to his feet, slowly. I won't simply go up against Donald just because Fabio asks us to. Send someone to release the information about the mole to Fabio. After all, it's only then Fabio will go all out against Donald. After both of them fight each other to death, only then we'll step in and get everything we need. Meanwhile, Donald was standing in front of the aquarium, looking at the piranhas fighting each other for a piece of meat. The water was dyed red with blood, and one couldn't see through what was going on inside. Chunky came in and said, Sir, Fabio has proposed to work with Sunny,